My friend and I were at a party on the Hopi reservation in Polaca. It was getting late, and we had a pretty good buzz on. Most of the people we knew had already trickled out, so we decided it was a good time as any to leave. We looked around for the friend who was supposed to give us a ride, because we had all come together. We found him in a back bedroom, drunk and passed out, so we had no choice. We're gonna have to walk. The two of us lived on the other side of the gulch. A good 2 miles. Between were nothing but trees, scrubs, bushes, and some hills. We had barely cleared the houses onto the road passing between the wooded area when we got this funny feeling we were being watched. We decided to leave the road and cut through the trees. It wasn't the easiest walk, but it would cut the distance down some. And even though it was pitch black outside, we knew the way pretty well. We had been a good 20 minutes off the road and heading up towards the hills when that same feeling of being watched came upon us again. We both turned around at the same time, but it was so dark we couldn't see anything. But then, my friend Paul swore he heard some kind of cackling or mumbling. I didn't hear anything, except for maybe the wind in the top of the trees at our back. By that time, none of us was gonna admit it. We were feeling a little scared. Without saying a single word, we picked up the pace, moving along pretty good but not running. And that's when I heard it too. But now, it was more like heavy breathing. Paul then grabbed my arm and gave me a tug forward. We took off running straight up the hill, which wasn't that big, but it was still enough of a slope so I wasn't feeling it in my legs. And on top of that, I was drunk. Think about this for a second. Running up a hill, at night, drunk, complete darkness, and as you're running, you hear footsteps behind you, and heavy breathing. Whatever it was though, stayed with us every step of the way. Right at the top, Paul and I stopped and turned around, expecting the thing to be right on us. But we were standing there, huffing and puffing, and looking at nothing but darkness. A few seconds passed, and then we heard a thin laughter, as if it was coming from down the hill and back from where we started running. We decided to keep moving and put some distance between us. We turned to go down the other side of the hill, and there, standing right in front of us, was this creature. It was standing up on 2 legs, like a circus dog, only much taller, with both paws extended out in front of it. It had this coyote face, and it was grinning at us, all of its teeth exposed, and its tongue sliding from one side to the other. I couldn't believe how skinny it was, as if it hadn't eaten in weeks. Its rounded stomach sticking out like one of those African kids in the charity ads, and the skin sinking between its ribs. The smell was unbelievably bad, like the smell of an old, wet dog. We both jumped back with a scream, like 2 little schoolgirls. As we did, the creature dropped down on all 4s and ran past us and down the hill back where we had come from. It was yipping and laughing all the way. Paul and I started praying like never before, swearing to Jesus that if he got us home safe, we would never drink again. The laughing, or whatever you want to call it, died down and disappeared. Wasting no time, the 2 of us made our way down that hill and into the trees that separated us from where we lived. As we walked along, we were trying to convince each other everything was okay. It was only a coyote out searching for a meal. We scared it jumped up at us, and then it ran away. We started feeling better about things overall. We got across the open field and into the trees. We made it all the way through there without anything else happening. However, Just as we stepped out towards that first backyard that we needed to cut through to get to the street, we heard this unmistakable chatter, like some little monkey laughing, coming out of the trees just behind us. It was followed by the sound of something moving through the branches and twigs. My friend Paul then yelled out some words that he said that his grandmother had taught him, and just like that, the noise ceased and it got real quiet. He then grabbed my arm again and we ran. We ran as fast as we could through that yard and out to the road. We ran straight for the house where Paul lives with his grandmother. When we got there, we found her awake and sitting in the kitchen with only a small candle for light. She was burning some cedar. When she saw us, she put her finger up to her lips and then pointed to the outside of the house. Her lips were moving, but silently. We stood there still for a minute or two, and then she spoke out loud, saying it was okay. She then said a prayer and that the Skinwalker was now gone. I have no idea how she knew, and I didn't care. Needless to say, I spent the rest of the night there, sleeping where I knew I would be safe. Do you love Native American legends? Have you heard of the Goat Man? No? Then please, allow me to enlighten you. I heard the legend when a power outage on our reservation made us decide to have a fire. As we all know, nothing goes better with a good fire than a good story. That's where I learned about the Goat Man. The legend goes that they shapeshift. They love human forms most of all, which is what makes them so dangerous. It's also said that if you find a bone of one, take a picture and keep it in your house. It will wait. For what though, you may ask? The answer is they wait for you to leave. Once you leave, they ransack the place until they find what you took from them. There was even an incident about that night that I heard of, where some people met the Goat Man face to face. It was a night like the one I was experiencing. Some men had decided to have a fire in the desert, and they told some stories about it. Then a stranger walked out of the desert and took a seat, never speaking a word. No one really got a good look at the stranger. One man brought up the legend of the Goat Man, causing the stranger to listen a little more closely. At the end, the other men nervously laughed, and the stranger stayed silent. The man decided to go back to their homes and put out the fire. They didn't have enough room for the stranger, and they figured he could hitchhike back to town. They had just left when they saw something chasing after their truck. Afraid, they sped up, and the creature sped up its pursuit as well. When it reached the truck, it flipped over and dragged 3 men off into the night. What happened to them? Well, they were never found. So here I am, to warn you, and to be careful of the Goat Man. They can shapeshift, didn't I tell you? That homeless man begging for change that you encounter on your way home tonight could be one, or your boss, teacher, or even your friends. This happened about a week and a half ago. I live in Washington State. I'm a 14-year-old male. I'm homeschooled, so I don't leave the house much, and I live with my mom and my dad. It was March 7, 2022, at about 12 a.m. I was just listening to the old Jenna Marbles and Julian podcast from like 3 years ago and playing some video games. I was kind of tired, and I had just finished eating a snack, so I went to go brush my teeth and wash my face. I did all my business in the bathroom and came back to my room. When I opened the door, my cat was up in his cat tower, which is right next to my window, and his back was arched up. His hair on his back was all up, and he was hissing, which I had never heard him do. I look out the window, and standing there is my dad. This gave me a relief for a second, until I realized it wasn't my dad. It was taller than my dad, and its smile was weirdly big. My dad never just smiles at me, and he's never came up to my window before. What the fuck is that? I said as I ran out my room, crying and shaking, obviously, because I never seen anything like that before. I went to my mom, who was sleeping on the couch, and I shook her awake. I told her to go check if my dad was in the bedroom, and she asked why. And I told her I would tell her after she checked, and indeed, he was sleeping in the bedroom. I told her what happened, and she sort of believed me, but sort of didn't. So she went into my room and checked out my window. Whatever it was gone. She checked all the other windows and doors, and nothing was there. She even grabbed my cat, and we slept on the couch that night, all together. Today was the first day I was able to go back into my room, March 17, and I still haven't told my dad about it. I have no idea what it was that I saw, but the only thing I can think of is that it was a skinwalker. Anyway, I don't think I'll ever be able to forget this, and I'm still terrified that I'm gonna end up seeing it again. It's crazy. I looked behind my shoulder like 10 times while writing this. What the fuck? Two years ago, I went to go visit family up in North Minnesota around Labor Day weekend. I won't give the exact location, but will provide at least a general location where this happened. To keep it short, I'm hoping someone may have had similar experience, or may have had a general idea what this thing or entity was walking around our tent. On that Labor Day weekend, my girlfriend and I were planning on spending time camping with her family. Both of us were very excited to get away from the everyday city life, and we anticipated a much needed low-key weekend. We arrived at their location around noon on Saturday, and were all greeted by everyone there. During the day and evening, we were enjoying ourselves with random fun activities, and catching up on how everyone was doing. As the night started to settle in, we were all near the campfire for a few hours until 11 p.m. Eventually, the family and ourselves called it a night, and we all headed to bed. My girlfriend and I were offered to sleep in a bigger size 6-person tent. It belonged to a relative who I will call Mary. It was a kind gesture at that time, as we only brought a 2-person sized tent. Having that additional space for our belongings and our air mattress was a nice added feature. Mary's tent was positioned not too far from the campfire and the rest of the family. The family did a wonderful job clearing and maintaining the area for their smaller RVs and additional tents. To the back of the tent, about 20 to 30 yards, is where the woods started with semi-thick brush and trees. Us three were laying down chatting, and eventually they both fell asleep. For some reason though, I couldn't sleep, so I was on my phone passing time, hoping to eventually drift off to sleep. This is when I heard a faint noise in the woods about 40 yards back. I dismissed it right away, as deer are known in this area, and I continued to space off on my phone looking at random things. About 10 to 20 minutes later, I heard something get closer to our tent. I could hear twigs snapping and moving between bushes getting closer to our area. This started to get my attention, as I could start physically feeling a faint shake in the ground as this thing was wandering around. Moments later, this thing was about 10 yards away from our area, walking, running back and forth. Whatever this thing was, with each step it took, I could physically feel the vibration from the ground. This thing was big, and the best way to describe this feeling is if you went to a live rock concert and you felt the kick drum hit your body. At this point, I was a bit terrified as I was trying to follow the footsteps, walking or running at the back and the side of the tent. This thing got at least 5 yards near our area, and then suddenly it stopped where Mary was sleeping at, near her tent. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, scared of what this thing was going to do next. I shit you not, a few seconds later, Mary shot up from being dead asleep. She gasped for air and was calling our names to wake us up. You could hear her voice. She was terrified. This thing hightailed off back into the woods. Both of us were very startled at this point. The woods had become dead silent, and eventually, we got enough courage to look outside. We saw and heard nothing, and about 30 minutes later, we ran to the shop to grab a shotgun. Another anomaly during this whole thing, while we were alert and awake, Mary mentioned during this time I was awake that she was having a dream. She mentioned these things were tormenting her, saying they wanted her soul and to give it to them. My girlfriend dismissed the whole thing and said it was most likely just a deer, etc., running around. After hearing my girlfriend say that, I never told anyone about this story until recently, as I started to think about it again, trying to figure out what the hell this thing or entity was. My family has lived in Iowa since July of 2017, and we live in a small neighborhood with a minimum of 25 houses, and it is surrounded by a forest. I've seen many horror movies, and most of the movies are always in a forest, so I've been paranoid and been alarmed. Our dog was getting old, so we got another dog. And so now, our old dog has a friend. We named our new dog Tucker, and he is a very energetic dog with everyone and everything. Our old dog died a few months later, and Tucker was the only interactive pet we now had. A couple of years later, my mom and dad got divorced, and she moved on to a guy that lives a couple of miles away from our house. My mom and dad settle on a schedule on what day they can spend the day with us, while the other goes somewhere else for a couple of days. For context, my mom's side is Native, and we do believe in the lore of Skinwalkers and Wendigos. On one of my mom's days, she drives up this road where it's surrounded by a bunch of trees and a couple of houses and 2 farms. There is a hill on this road that she has to drive up, and as my mom drove up the hill, she saw something in a field near the neighborhood. What she saw was tall, gray-skinned, had deer hoofs as feet, and it was walking into the woods. My mom was confused, and when she reached the stop sign, she looked back in her mirror and nothing. Now my mom was scared because she remembered all the stories of the Wendigo and Skinwalkers and drove off to our house. When she told me this, I was already scared because of all the stories I had heard on YouTube. As she told the story, I remember the Skinwalker, mostly all the stories of the encounters I had found on YouTube. After this, I was extremely cautious when I was outside on my bike rides. Without thinking, I rode my bike near the hill where my mom saw the possible Wendigo. I brought my camera to take pictures of the landscape because it was nice out, but I became paranoid when I came near to the field, and I always trust my paranoia. As I rode off, I felt like I was being watched when I rode past the field. A couple of days later, it was nighttime, and my dog had to go outside to go to the bathroom. I put my dog on a leash that is connected to the porch, and I let Tucker out. I turned on the light that was outside so I could see what Tucker was doing, but I was cooking food in the kitchen for me, so I had to focus on that. When my food was finished, I heard my dog start barking at something, so I walked towards the door so I could see what he was doing. As I approached the door, I can see Tucker is barking at something in the dark. I opened the door more and told Tucker to stop barking and to get inside because his barking could wake up the neighbors. After telling him to get inside, he kept barking at something in the darkness. My paranoia kicked in and I shouted to him to get inside. He kept barking. That's when I started to get scared, and I finally looked into the darkness to see nothing but eyes shining from the porch light. As I saw those eyes, my instincts kicked in to pull on the leash and scream out, "Get inside!" Finally, Tucker responds by reacting to the pull and running towards the door, and I slammed the door as soon as Tucker ran inside. I shut the porch light off and took the leash off his collar. I locked every single door and window in the house and covered every window and anything that you can look through. After Tucker was off the leash, he ran downstairs into our basement, so I grabbed my food and went downstairs to keep an eye on my dog. It's been 2 months since then, and my routine when it got dark was what I did when I saw those eyes outside. Close the blinds, lock the doors, and turn off the lights from outside. Now, whenever I'm outside, I'm always with a group of people, or I always keep a weapon on me.